You've ever been in that moment, that exact moment when someone says something to you, something that cuts deep, and before you can even process what just happened, you feel it. That heat rising from your chest to your face, your jaw tightening, your hands forming fists almost unconsciously. Maybe it's in a meeting at work, and a colleague makes a condescending remark disguised as constructive feedback. Or maybe it's at a family gathering, and someone brings up that old failure of yours, that thing you've been trying to forget, and they laugh about it like it's nothing. And in that split second, you feel this overwhelming urge to react, to defend yourself, to explain, to make them understand that they're wrong about you, that you're not what they're implying. So, you open your mouth, and the words start pouring out, faster than you intended, louder than you meant. You hear yourself, explaining, justifying, proving, and with every word you feel something slipping away. Power, respect, control, and the worst part? You see it in their eyes, that subtle satisfaction, that little smirk that says, "Gotcha." They wanted this reaction. They fed on your emotion like sharks sensing blood in the water. And you gave it to them. You handed them your power on a silver platter because you couldn't control what you felt. If you've lived this, if you know exactly what I'm talking about, if you're tired of being the person who loses their composure while everyone else stays calm and collected, then stay right here because what I'm about to show you will change the entire game for you. Here's something most people never understand about power dynamics, and this is something Niccolo Machiavelli knew 500 years ago when he wrote The Prince. He said that the prince must learn to control his emotions because the moment you show your feelings, you show your weaknesses. And the moment you show your weaknesses, you give your enemies the map to destroy you. This isn't about being cold or robotic. This is about understanding a fundamental law of human interaction. Emotion, when visible and uncontrolled, is a position of vulnerability. It's a position where you're no longer in command of yourself, which means you're definitely not in command of the situation. Robert Greene talks about this in the 48 Laws of Power, specifically in Law 4, always say less than necessary. He explains that the more you talk, the more common you appear, and the less control you have. But there's something even deeper here. It's not just about talking less. It's about showing less. When you react emotionally to what someone says or does, you're essentially telling them, "You have power over me. You can affect me. You can control my state." And once people know they can control your state, once they understand they can make you angry, defensive, or flustered with just a few words, you've lost. You've given them the remote control to your emotions, and they will press those buttons every single time they want to feel powerful. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in real life. You're at work, and there's this person, maybe a coworker, maybe even your boss, who seems to have a talent for getting under your skin. They make these little comments, these subtle digs that aren't quite direct enough to confront but are definitely meant to diminish you. And every time they do it, you feel that anger bubbling up inside you. So what do? You defend yourself. You explain why they're wrong. You list all your accomplishments, all the reasons why you deserve respect. And what happens? They just sit there, calm as a lake with that infuriating little smile, nodding along like they're listening, but you can see it in their eyes. They're enjoying this. Because while you're over there losing your composure, getting red in the face, talking a mile a minute, they're sitting in perfect control. Who looks weak in this scenario? Who looks like they're desperate for approval? It's not them, it's you. And that's the trap. The trap is thinking that defending yourself, explaining yourself, reacting emotionally, will somehow make you look stronger. But it does the exact opposite. It broadcasts to everyone watching that you're insecure, that you can be rattled, that you need their validation to feel okay about yourself. Now, before we go deeper into this, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with yourself. How many times have you replayed a conversation in your head, hours or even days after it happened? That conversation where someone said something that bothered you, and you didn't respond the way you wanted to. So now you're lying in bed at 3 in the morning, running through all the perfect comebacks you should have said, all the ways you could have defended yourself better. If this has happened to you, I want you to leave a comment right now and just write, "I've been there." You don't need to explain the situation. You don't need to share details if you don't want to. Just write those 3 words. I've been there. Because here's what happens when you do that. You realize you're not alone. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of people watching this right now who are going to read your comment and think, "Me too. I thought it was just me." And suddenly this pain you've been carrying around, this feeling that there's something wrong with you, it starts to lose its grip because you see that it's not your weakness, it's not your flaw, it's simply that no one ever taught you how to handle these situations. So go ahead, write in the comments, "I've been there," and leave your mark here, because your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to read today to feel less alone. Now let's talk about the solution. And this is where things get interesting, because the solution isn't what most people think. Most people think the solution to being emotionally reactive is to become emotionless, to turn into some kind of robot who doesn't feel anything. But that's not it. That's not power. That's suppression, and suppression eventually explodes. Real power in emotional dynamics is about something called sovereign detachment. It's a concept you see in Stoic philosophy, in Marcus Aurelius, in Epictetus. The idea is simple but profound. You feel the emotion, you acknowledge it, but you don't let it control your actions. You create space between the stimulus and your response. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, said that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. This is it. This is the key. When someone says something designed to provoke you, there's a moment, a split second where you can choose. You can choose to react from your emotion, or you can choose to respond from your power. And here's the thing, when you choose power, when you choose to stay calm while they're trying to rattle you, you flip the entire script. Suddenly they're the ones who look weak because they tried to provoke you and failed. Their weapon didn't work. And nothing makes a manipulator feel more powerless than realizing their manipulation tactics don't work on you. Let me give you some concrete examples of what this looks like. Someone makes a passive-aggressive comment about your work. Instead of launching into a defensive explanation of how hard you worked or how they don't understand the full context, you simply look at them, pause for a moment, and say, "Interesting perspective." Then you go completely silent. No explanation, no defense, just those 2 words and silence. What have you done? You've acknowledged their comment without giving it power. You haven't shown that it bothered you. You haven't given them the emotional reaction they were fishing for. And now they're sitting there, probably feeling a bit uncomfortable because their attempt to get under your skin fell flat. Or, here's another scenario. Someone brings up a past mistake of yours in front of others, trying to embarrass you. The old you would have gotten defensive, would have explained all the circumstances, would have tried to minimize it or justify it. The new you? You simply smile slightly and say, "Yeah, that happened, learned a lot from that," and then you change the subject or go silent. What you've done is refuse to enter the frame they tried to put you in. They wanted to see you squirm, to see you defensive and ashamed. Instead, you owned it briefly and moved on like it's not a big deal. Because here's a secret. Things are only as big of a deal as the energy you give them. If you give something massive emotional energy, it becomes massive in the eyes of everyone watching. If you give it minimal energy, it shrinks. Now let's go deeper into the psychology of why this works, because understanding the why makes the how much easier. When you react emotionally, especially with defensiveness or anger, you're operating from what psychologists call an ego-threatened state. Your ego, your sense of self, feels attacked, so it goes into defense mode. But here's the problem. Your ego is not you. Your ego is a construct, a collection of beliefs about who you are. built up over years based on what people told you, what society told you, what you told yourself. And when someone attacks your ego, what they're really attacking is this construct, this image. They're not attacking your actual essence, your actual being. But your ego doesn't know the difference. So it reacts like it's a life or death situation. This is why people get so disproportionately upset over small slights. It's not really about the slight itself. It's about what the slight represents to the ego. If someone implies you're incompetent, your ego hears you are worthless. If someone mocks you, your ego hears you are unlovable. But the truth is, none of these things are actually true. They're just attacks on a construct. And once you realize this, once you can separate your true self from your ego, you become almost impossible to manipulate emotionally. Because you stop taking things personally, not because you don't care, but because you understand that most attacks aren't even about you. They're about the other person's need to feel powerful, to feel superior, to discharge their own insecurity. This connects to something Carl Jung talked about extensively, which is shadow work. Jung said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When someone's comment really gets under your skin, when it makes you disproportionately angry or defensive, that's a signal. That's your psyche telling you there's something there you haven't integrated yet. Maybe it's a fear you haven't faced. Maybe it's a part of yourself you're ashamed of. Maybe it's something you secretly believe about yourself that you don't want to be true. The people who can trigger you the most are the people who touch those unintegrated parts. So here's the powerful part. When you do the internal work, when you face those shadows, when you integrate those rejected parts of yourself, people's words start to lose their power over you. Not because you've become numb, but because you've become whole. You've already faced the worst things about yourself in the privacy of your own consciousness. So when someone tries to throw them in your face publicly, it doesn't land the same way. You can simply think, yeah, I know that about myself. I've already dealt with it. Your attempt to shame me with it is ineffective. Let's talk about some advanced techniques for maintaining emotional sovereignty in the moment. First technique, the pause. This is simple but incredibly powerful. When someone says something that you feel an emotional charge around, before you respond, pause, count. To 3 in your head, take a breath. This tiny pause does several things. It breaks the automatic stimulus response pattern. It gives your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, a chance to come online before your amygdala, the emotional reactive part, takes over. And it also creates a subtle power dynamic where you're not rushing to respond, which itself signals confidence and control. People who are secure in themselves don't rush. They take their time. Second technique, strategic ambiguity. Instead of explaining yourself in detail, which is what insecure people do, give responses that are deliberately a bit vague or open to interpretation. Someone criticizes your approach to something. Instead of a detailed defense, you might say, there are a lot of ways to approach this. This is the one that made sense to me, period. You're not giving them ammunition. You're not giving them details to pick apart. You're simply stating your position and letting it stand. Third technique, the mirror. This is a bit more advanced but incredibly effective with manipulators. When someone makes a manipulative or passive-aggressive comment, instead of reacting to the content, you reflect back the dynamic. You might say something like, "It seems like you're trying to get a reaction from me with that comment," or "I notice you often bring up my past failures when we're in groups. What's that about?" What you've done is pulled back the curtain on their tactic. You've made the invisible visible. And manipulators hate this because their power depends on their tactics being subtle and unacknowledged. Here's something crucial to understand. When you stop being emotionally reactive, some people in your life are going to escalate. They're going to try harder to get a reaction from you because that reaction is what they were feeding on. It gave them a sense of power, a sense of control. And now that you're not giving it to them anymore, they feel powerless, and that scares them. So they might get meaner. They might get more direct, they might even accuse you of being cold or unfeeling. This is the extinction burst. It's a term from behavioral psychology. When a behavior stops being rewarded, it often increases in intensity before it finally stops. So, if someone was used to making snide comments and getting a big emotional reaction from you, and now they make a snide comment and you just calmly acknowledge it and move on, they might make an even worse comment next time. But here's what you need to know. If you stay consistent, if you maintain your emotional sovereignty through this escalation, one of two things will happen. Either they'll give up because they're not getting what they want from you anymore, or they'll reveal themselves fully. They'll get so escalated in their attempts to provoke you that everyone around will see exactly what they're doing. Either way, you win. But you have to be willing to weather that storm. Now I want to address something important, because I know some of you are thinking, but if I don't defend myself, people will think the accusations are true. If I don't react, people will think I'm weak. And I get it. This is the fear that keeps most people trapped in reactive patterns. But here's the reality. The people whose opinions actually matter, the people who are secure in themselves, the people who have real power and discernment, they judge you by your composure, not by how well you defend yourself. In fact, the more you defend yourself, the guiltier you look. It's the same reason why innocent people often advise you to remain silent when questioned by police. It's not because you have something to hide. It's because explaining yourself, defending yourself, trying to prove your innocence often makes you look more suspicious. The same principle applies in social dynamics. Strong people don't explain themselves excessively because they don't need external validation to know their worth. So when you stay calm in the face of an accusation, when you address it briefly if at all and then move on, what you're communicating is, I know who I am, I don't need to convince you. And that, my friend, is a position of tremendous power. Let's talk about the concept of frame control because this is really what we're discussing here. Frame control is the ability to maintain your interpretation of reality in an interaction, especially when someone is trying to impose their interpretation on you. When someone makes a comment designed to put you down, they're trying to impose a frame where you are lesser and they are superior. If you react emotionally, if you get defensive, you've accepted their frame. You've stepped into the reality they created where you are indeed lesser because you're now desperately trying to prove you're not. But if you maintain your frame, if you stay calm and refuse to accept their interpretation, you've held your power. A master of frame control can be accused of something ridiculous, and instead of getting defensive, they might just laugh genuinely and say, "That's a creative interpretation," or they might not even acknowledge it at all. Just continue talking about what they were talking about as if the accusation wasn't even made. This completely nullifies the attack, because an attack only has power if the target accepts it as legitimate. If you don't even acknowledge it as worth addressing, you've essentially communicated that it's so far beneath you that it doesn't warrant a response. There's a concept in martial arts, particularly in Aikido, called blending. Instead of meeting force with force, you blend with the attacker's energy and redirect. Terisu, the same principle works in verbal and emotional confrontations. Someone comes at you with aggression or manipulation, and instead of matching their energy with your own defensive aggression, you blend. You stay calm. You might even agree with part of what they're saying in an unexpected way. Someone says you're too sensitive? Instead of defending how you're not sensitive, you might say, "Yeah, I do feel things deeply. I found it helps me understand people better." You've taken what they meant as an insult, reframed it as a strength, and given them nothing to push against. They wanted resistance so they could feel powerful overcoming it. You gave them acceptance, which is much harder to fight. This is emotional Aikido, and it's one of the most sophisticated forms of power dynamics because it requires you to be so secure in yourself that you can agree with criticisms without them diminishing you. Now here's something that might sound counterintuitive, but it's essential. Part of emotional sovereignty is being willing to feel your emotions fully in private. This isn't about suppressing your emotions. Suppression leads to explosion. This is about choosing when and where you experience them fully. If someone says something that hurts you, you don't have to pretend it didn't hurt. You just don't show them that it hurt in the moment. Later, when you're alone, you sit with that feeling. You let yourself feel the anger, the sadness, the shame, whatever it is. You process. Maybe you journal about it. Maybe you talk to a trusted friend or therapist. Maybe you just sit in meditation and observe the feeling until it passes. But you do the emotional work away from the person who tried to use your emotions against you. This is the difference between emotional mastery and emotional suppression. Suppression says, I shouldn't feel this. Mastery says, I feel this and I choose how and when to express it. This distinction is everything. I want to give you a 7-day challenge because theory without practice is just entertainment. For the next 7 days, I want you to practice sovereign detachment in your interactions. Here's specifically what that means. When someone says something that you feel an emotional charge around, before you respond, pause for 3 full seconds. Count them in your head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Then, respond as calmly and briefly as possible. Your goal is not to convince them of anything. Your goal is simply to maintain your composure. If you catch yourself starting to over-explain or defend, stop mid-sentence if you have to. Just stop. You can even say, actually, I don't need to explain this, and leave it at that. Over these 7 days, keep a log. Write down each time you managed to maintain your composure when normally you would have reacted. Write down how it felt in your body to not react. Write down how the other person responded to your non-reactivity. I promise you, by day 7, you will have gathered enough evidence that this approach works to start making it a permanent part of how you operate. And more importantly, you'll start to notice that the people who were pushing your buttons aren't pushing them as hard anymore because they're learning it doesn't work. Here's what I need you to understand as we close this out. In power dynamics, emotion is not inherently weak. Emotion is human. Emotion is natural. Emotion is what makes life worth living. But uncontrolled emotion, reactive emotion, emotion that can be triggered on demand by others, that is a weak position. That is a vulnerability. That is a leash that others can pull whenever they want to steer you. And you are not a dog on a leash. You are not a puppet whose strings can be pulled by anyone who wants to see you dance. You are a sovereign being with the capacity to feel everything and still choose nothing but what serves you. This doesn't make you cold. This makes you powerful. This doesn't make you uncaring. This makes you strategic. And in a world full of people trying to manipulate your emotions to serve their agendas, being strategic with your emotional expression is not just smart. It's necessary for survival at the highest levels of social dynamics. The weak react, the strong respond, and there is a universe of difference between those two words. Reaction is automatic, unconscious, predictable. Response is chosen, conscious, powerful. And every single time you face a situation where someone is trying to pull an emotional reaction from you, you stand at a crossroads. One path leads to the old pattern where you react and lose respect and power. The other path leads to a new pattern where you respond and accumulate respect and power. Which path you take is entirely up to you. But now you know what each path leads to. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, it's because something here resonated with you. And I know exactly what you're feeling right now. That mixture of relief because you finally understand what's been happening to you. And also that anxiety of, can I actually change this? Let me tell you something, you're not alone in this. There are thousands of people in this community who are exactly where you are right now. People who also felt small in confrontations. People who also gave their power away with emotional reactions. People who also spent sleepless nights replaying conversations. And today they're different. Not because they became different people, but because they learned to stand in their power without apologizing for it. And you know how it started? with the decision to stop accepting crumbs of respect and start demanding full dignity. Here on this channel, every single week I bring you content like this. Practical strategies you can apply immediately. Deep insights into power dynamics that will completely change how you see social interactions. This isn't about becoming cold or arrogant. This is about reclaiming what was always yours, the right to exist without needing permission from anyone. If this resonates with you, if you're tired of being the person who loses composure while everyone else stays calm, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos, because each video is another piece in this transformation puzzle. And if this content helped you, if you felt like finally someone understands what you're going through, leave a like so more people who need this message can find it. I'll see you in the next video. And remember, you don't need to